Someone says something slightly off to you at lunch. Not cruel, not aggressive. Just a comment with a weird tone. Maybe they didn't even mean it. But 4 hours later, you're still thinking about it. 6 hours later, it's coloring your entire evening. The meal you were excited about doesn't taste as good. The show you were looking forward to feels flat. The whole day has this film over it now. And the worst part? You know it's a tiny thing. You know you should let it go. But your brain won't. It grabs onto these small moments like they weigh 1,000 pounds. And you're standing there wondering why you're the only person in the room still carrying it. There's a neuroscience explanation for this that most people never hear. Researchers at Stony Brook University identified a trait called sensory processing sensitivity. It exists in roughly 20% of the population. People with this trait don't just experience stimuli. They experience stimuli at higher resolution. The same comment that bounces off someone else's brain penetrates yours, not because you're fragile, because your neural architecture processes inputs with more depth, more detail, and more repetition than the average brain. Think of it like this. Most people have a coffee filter that catches the big grounds and lets the water through clean. Your filter catches everything, every ground, every particle, every micro-expression, every shift in tone, every awkward pause. You're not overreacting, you're over-receiving. But here's what makes this expensive. I call it the depth tax. The depth tax is the invisible cost of processing the world at full resolution while everyone around you is running on standard definition. It works like this. A rude comment doesn't just register as words. Your brain simultaneously processes the tone, the context, the facial expression, the possible motivations, the historical pattern of that person's behavior towards you, and 3 possible interpretations of what they actually meant. All of that happens in under 2 seconds. And your brain doesn't pick the most logical interpretation. It picks the most threatening one. Because brains that process deeply are also brains that prioritize threat detection. So now you're not just carrying a comment. You're carrying a comment plus 6 layers of analysis plus the worst case interpretation. That's why a tiny thing can flatten your whole day. It was never tiny inside your head. And this doesn't just apply to negative things. A beautiful song doesn't just sound nice to you. It physically moves through your body. A kind gesture from a stranger can make your eyes sting for no logical reason. You notice the way light hits a building at 4 p.m. and it does something to your chest that you could never explain to someone who doesn't feel it. The same wiring that makes a bad comment devastating makes a good moment transcendent. You don't just live life. You feel life at a volume that most people will never experience, and that volume has no off switch. Now here's the part that actually stings. You've been told your entire life that this is a problem. You're too sensitive. You take things too personally. You need thicker skin. And at some point, you believe them. You started apologizing for crying. You started pretending things didn't bother you. You built a version of yourself that smiles through the rude comment and says, "It's fine," when it absolutely isn't. And the exhaustion of that performance is worse than the comment itself. Because now, you're not just paying the depth tax on the original moment. You're paying a second tax on pretending it didn't happen. Double taxation. On every interaction. Every single day. That's why you're tired and you can't explain why. It's not the day that's exhausting. It's the depth at which you lived it. But here's what nobody says about the depth tax. It is the exact same mechanism that makes you the person who remembers. You remember what someone said to you 3 years ago because it mattered. You remember how someone's face changed when they got bad news because you actually saw it while everyone else was looking at their phone. You remember the tiny details that make people feel known. And in a world that is getting louder, faster, and more shallow by the day, the ability to feel things deeply is not a weakness. It is the rarest form of attention you can give another human being. The people who feel too much are the same people who love too well. And that is not a flaw in the system. That is the system working exactly as it should. The depth tax is real. It is heavy. It is daily. But what it buys you is a life that most people only skim the surface of. The next time a tiny thing hits you harder than it should, Don't apologize for it. That reaction is your brain telling you it is still paying attention, still processing, still feeling. In a world that is going numb, that might be the most valuable thing you have. Now, there's one specific habit that people who pay the depth tax develop without realizing it, and it quietly determines who stays in your life and who doesn't. That's what we're getting into next.